Okay, so I see that we're streaming live on YouTube, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Before I begin with what I need to say, just so everyone knows, there is an interpretation button on the bottom of Zoom. So if you click on it, you'll have access to Mandarin translation if that's what you need. So with that being said, welcome to today's meeting. My name is Jana Toby, and I'm hoping for a positive and productive meeting today. We have lots of people signed up to speak with concerns and questions, so I hope that our presentation today will clarify a lot of those things. With that being said, our goal is not to end before 9 o'clock p.m. So with that, I'm going to go over just a few things that I'd like to do to run the meeting efficiently. The first thing is that we're going to have our presentation with our wonderful presenters, and then we're going to open the floor up to questions from the committee members first, community board members, and then to the general public. I ask that everyone utilize the raise hand option feature, which is also on the bottom of Zoom, or comment your question, because we're going to be looking at that constantly. And if you raise your hand in person, like on the camera, I can't guarantee we're going to see you, so it might be missed. And then if you unmute without letting us know that you have a question, it usually ends in chaos because no one can hear what anyone is saying. So with that, we're also going to be limiting all comments to about 2 minutes, hopefully less than that, just to be respectful of everyone's time and everyone can be heard, because that's our intention, is to get to everyone. So we need your help to do that. And again, I want to emphasize, use the chat feature. With that, I want to introduce our wonderful translator with the NYC Department of Social Services and Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, Lydia, and she will be translating, again, like I said, to Mandarin tonight. You can get that on the bottom of Zoom. Today's meeting is regarding the NYC Department of Homeless Services Turning the Tide on Homelessness in New York City, a borough by borough plan. Extra supplemental material was emailed to board members, so feel free to refer to that. And this meeting is being live streamed for community members to watch, and also for later viewing. You can always go back to that. So our presentation tonight is in conjunction with the Department of Social Services /DHS and WIN, who will provide some background and information about the shelter for women and children. And this is specifically regarding a shelter that will sit to house 121 families with children and women at 801 65th Street. Presentation will be given by Jocelyn Carter, a DHS administrator, Faureen Howe, an associate, okay, we'll get to that too, and Associate Commissioner Megan Linhan, and Diana Santos from WIN. So that program is actually running 13 shelters and over 400 supportive housing units across NYC. Before we keep going, I saw in the chat that the Chinese interpretation isn't working. So maybe we should address that before we start our presentation.
Yeah, so I started it on my end here. Wait, I assigned Chinese. Manage. A second interpreter.
I see. So they're saying that there's Mandarin interpretation, but no Cantonese. Maybe you clicked one, or are there two interpreters? My mistake.
I know there was one interpreter who was here.
I'm guessing that's the Mandarin interpretation. So we will not have Cantonese. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so is Mandarin working?
Yeah, so Mandarin is working, so I'll let them know, I guess, in the chat that there's no Cantonese. So with that being said, then I turn the virtual
Lydia.
Stage.
Yes, I could hear you.
You can hear?
Okay, so on my end, let me just say, hold on. Assigned. So on my end, it says I'm going to hit the assign button. Does that work? Okay. I apologize to everyone. I practiced this earlier. I don't know why it's not working now. Try one more thing, and then I'm going to suggest maybe to Lydia that
it's Emily for Jeremy. It's not Eli.
well, Lydia, I've hit it on my end, assign you to the room, and it's I don't know why it's not working. So my apologies. I don't know, Jana, it doesn't seem to be working on our end. Perhaps we can, maybe Lydia, if there's a way for you in the main room to translate for everyone, perhaps we could do it that way, or.
If we want to try one more time, just because somebody in the chat said that they do hear the Mandarin interpretation. So if it's just one person, I'm guessing there's no Cantonese as well. Correct?
Oh, so they were able to hear.
Yeah, somebody else is differentiating between Mandarin and Cantonese. So maybe Lydia, if you can talk one more time and so we can see if it's working. I mean, I don't hear the interpretation, but maybe she can say something in there and we can figure it out. Yeah, I hear it when I click on the bottom of the screen, but maybe it's not both dialects. So we can work with what we have for now. I can hear now. Okay, so it's looking that it's working now and people in the chat are saying that it's working. So while it's working, I'm going to turn the virtual stage to our presenters so we can get tonight started.
Yes.
So I am going to go first. I am Jocelyn Carter. I am the DHS administrator, and Doreen Howe, who is, it says, associate commissioner. She's the deputy commissioner for family services, and she's in charge at DHS of all the families with children shelters. Our colleagues from WIN are on the call, the chat, and they're going to talk specifically about WIN and the program that's going to be coming to 65th Street. I like to start off by really giving an overview of our Turning the Tide plan that was announced almost 5 years in February 2017, which is our blueprint that we've been driving toward for almost the past 5 years. And then once WIN presents, like Janice says, we will take some questions. So I first want to thank you, Jana and Josephine, for having us here tonight. We believe in having a dialogue and answering questions that you might have. Sometimes the answers are not easy, and there are times that we may have to come back to you, and sometimes we may agree to disagree, but I've done multiple of these meetings. I will not tell you something that's not true. If I don't know the answer, I will get the answer at a different time. You will resign the chat. And if it's something we certainly cannot do, I will tell you that. I'm not going to tell you things that I can't answer. I will hear your concerns. I think it's important to hear from you, and you will hear back from me. I am in charge of the agency. I report up to the Commissioner of Social Services, who is Stephen Banks. But we do believe in this administration that New Yorkers can and they do experiencing homelessness from every community in all the boroughs. And we do believe that it's not just one community's issue, and we should all work together. And so sometimes families, and these are families with children, and families in this case are families who are under 18, who are mothers primarily, because families are headed by single moms a lot, who are in our shelter system. In our system, we have families with children, we have single adult males and single adult females, as well as adult families, and those are families who have no child under 21 with them. It could be a mom with an adult son. It could be a couple with no children. And so we have the gamut of those who need our help. We also have, and this is what people think of when they think of unsheltered homeless, the ones people who are on the street. That's a very small population of who we serve. The majority of people with us are families with children. And for us, that's important. So families should not be, of course, not in New York City on the street, and every person who needs a shelter bed deserves a right to be in shelter. And if I had to go to shelter with my son, and I've been at the agency for 17 years, we believe that we should be able to have a bed and have a bed that's appropriate where you and I would not be discouraged from coming in if it's an emergency. So how did we get here? So homelessness in the city, New York City, and across the country, it's really a result of changes in our economy, as you all know, and past choices have been made in New York City, in Albany, and in Washington, and it increased 115% between 1994 and 2014. It grew nearly 40% to more than 51,000 when this administration came in. And that's due because, of course, wages did not keep up with rents. And so evictions really went up, and there were no places in terms of people who needed to be sheltered to go, and they came into a shelter system. We believe that every person has a right to shelter, and that's what we provide. And so this administration really made progress to help our neighbors to get back on their feet. And this Turning the Tide plan, we talked about how do we really put prevention first so that we and transform a haphazard system that really dates back to, the Giuliani administration. And we wanted to really change the way that we do our service. We really wanted to look at doing prevention first. We want to make sure that if you're coming into shelter, that we get rid of places that were not appropriate. And so we've been able to drive evictions down. We reduced the number of children and families coming into shelter even before the pandemic started. We have really transformed our shelter system. We got rid of these haphazard old buildings that were not appropriate when we started in 2016. I've been here for a long time. I've seen really horrible places. We had 647 buildings. We reduced that by 290, and we reduced our footprint. But we also have had the opportunity to have those who are unsheltered move to permanency, right? So our goal is, while you're in an emergency and you need a bed and you need a unit, we provide that, and providers like WIN do the services that are necessary so that families don't linger in shelter and that they move on to go to permanency, right? So it's not families are being warehoused, families have their own individual units, there's social services on site, and we will talk about that to provide services for the families that we serve. So what have we done? Part of what we want to do is to create, and what we have done is to create high quality capacity that meets the needs. And so when we notified this community, we've always said, and when I worked in a different administration, I've been here since 2004, there was no notification. You woke up and there was a shelter on your block because we snuck in and we just put it on the block. We committed to notifying in communities 30 days, at least 30 days in advance. This administration, we've averaged more than 200 days in advance. We notified on this site in October, mid-October, for a site that's not going to open until next year, because you want to make sure that there's communication that's happening and give you the opportunity to do that. We want to share your concerns. We want to make sure that we can address those concerns. That's why we're here tonight. We believe, and my staff, Doreen and her team at DHS at the back office, there's a team of staff that works with WIN, and we work together to provide services. So there will be, and we will talk more about the specific work that happens there and who is there, but the team at DHS does really provide back-end services to the provider to make sure that the regulatory agencies' needs are being met. So we're not putting families in warehouses and not attributing to their needs. We want to see what the needs are. Once the site is opened, then we do have, and Yuri is part of this, who's on the chat with us, developing a community advisory board so that services, if there are any issues, that is met. And this happens monthly. And we find that as we open shelters, the advisory boards happen, they meet much more consistently in the beginning, and then they kind of peter off because there's no real issues that might surface. And if there are issues that surface, they're addressed quickly. And we also want to make sure that there's a 24-hour hotline that is shared with you all, so that if the issues that come up, we can certainly meet that need. I also want to say that when I came in as a program analyst and I was a staff at DHS, shelters were only in certain communities. We believe in this administration, and I strongly believe this, that shelters should not just be in only communities of color or communities that are poor. Shelters should be in all neighborhoods. And so we've been able to notify in every community board, and that's one of the things that I feel is important, and I know the administration feels that. I have worked in the agency for 17 years. I've started as a low staff, and I've been able to be promoted up into this chair. I know the difficulty. I know what the fears that may happen when we are citing and we're coming in, but I can tend to you, and I could say this truthfully, that when people think of shelter and families with children shelter, the ideas that come to mind is not the reality. And that's why we're here tonight, to really help you to understand what's happening. The families with children, 70% of them are employed. They may be underemployed, right? Rents in New York City are sky high. And so, the way I like to say this is, I'm a healthy woman, but there's one morning I woke up in an emergency room. That's what this is. Shelter is emergency services. So we need to provide emergency services when there's an emergency. If a family is evicted, if a family has a domestic violence situation, right? This is why people typically come to us. There's an emergency in their family. And then they come to us, we provide stability and move them out, help them to exit the shelter, exit the permanency. That's our primary goal. And so it is working with our providers to make sure that does happen. I'll give you two more things, and I'm going to pass the baton over to Wynn, but I just have a couple more points I would like to make. So on Wynn, I know I'm taking all your thunder, but on sites that we provide services to, single adult men, single adult women, families with children, we are ensuring that there's 24-hour staff on site. Security is on site, social services on site. In families with children, it's clinical staff on site. So it's a comprehensive staffing pattern that's there. It's a regulatory agency that says we have to have X amount of staff per family. There is a director of social services. There's a agency director, right? There's strategy of staff that's there. Then of course, there's the leadership at the provider's level, right? So there's always increasing level of staff. And then on our end, Doreen has the same in terms of who's working with the provider. So we believe safety is important. We believe that the good neighbor policy is important. We work with our families to be good neighbors. There's counseling that's happening. If there are issues in community in terms of families not following rules and regulations, the WIN staff will be doing a lot of that work. And if there's a need, we can and we do transfer if necessary, right? We're not going to drop families in and leave families without the support that they need. Our goal is to be good neighbors. Our goal is to work with all of you. Our goal as families with children is to make sure that families who need service get service. Now remember, these are families with children, right? These are not, I have one child. I want to make sure for the families, and I believe that every family, needs to be treated well, that you're welcome into the families and recognize that we're all one, paycheck away. I could certainly say that I'm the only income earner in my family at this point. Something happens to me and I'm making my salary is nothing, but of course I couldn't survive without income, right? And so a lot of our families, we want to help them to get to the place that they could be self-sufficient. This administration did, in the last administration, I keep saying that, but I worked in the last administration, there were no subsidies to help families exit shelter. We've been able to put subsidies back in place to help exit shelter. We've increased the subsidy level so that there's more opportunity for families to exit the permanency. And so that is our goal. I'm going to take a pause here. So I'm going to have Wynn, do their presentation, and then I'll come back and answer some questions. That's okay, Jana? Okay.
Hi. So because we heard from sorry to interject, but we heard from the community that translation services is needed. We have Lydia, but I can't hear Lydia. We have Ian who can jump in. He's also a translator. So how does this work? Is it one or two sentences and then
So
Ian
Yuri,
translates?
Yuri, right now there is a separate channel for translation. So at the
Oh,
bottom
okay.
of, yeah, at the bottom of the screen. So I did check in with the channel, and there is word for word translation taking place right now.
Perfect. My apologies. Thanks for the
Yeah,
clarification.
Ian is here. I can also add him to the channel.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so when you guys are up, Diana or Megan?
Great. Thank you so much, Administrator Carter. I'm Megan Linehan. Good evening. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at WIN. Just to add a few notes to what has already been said just about our program model and how we operate. So WIN is the largest provider of shelter to families experiencing homelessness in New York City. As was mentioned, we do have 13 buildings that we currently operate. And again, while the majority of our families are led by women, I just want to add that we do have some families that are led by men, and we do have men that come in as partners to, to our families. So I want to be really upfront that this won't be a facility that's exclusive to women and children, right? There will be men living in the facility. And then just to speak a little bit further about the kind of services that we offer. So we really believe in meeting the clients where they are, right?
那么也有给男性的，也是这样子混合在一起的。
I think what happened is that it was ended by the host. So maybe Josephina, something was clicked. Oh, okay. It went back. Go ahead.
Okay.
I added,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's done. Go ahead.
We're good. Okay. So just to speak a little bit about the kind of services that we offer that was discussed a little bit, we believe in really meeting the clients where they are, right? So what that means is that we have case management on site. We have social workers that are part of the Thrive program that are on site. Some of which are designated specifically to work with our children and young people. We have income building specialists on site because, as was mentioned, the majority of our moms who come into shelter are already working when they meet us. So we don't want to call it job training because a lot of them have jobs, right? And they want to say like, no, I just want a better job and I want to be on a management track and I want to do more, right? So it's income building. We also have housing specialists who, as Administrator Carter mentioned, work specifically with the different kinds of subsidies that are available to get our families placed in permanent housing. And we have daycare and recreation programs, right, that are run in a trauma-informed way in conjunction with Bank Street College. So these are programs that are STEAM-based. They run after school and every school break for all of our kids, right, to deal with any of that brain drain that can happen over the summer. As also was mentioned, we have 24-hour security on site. Our security are also trained in trauma-informed care, right? So this is really about de-escalation and about a relationship with clients. And it winds up being a really kind of productive and wonderful relationship that we wind up having. We also have maintenance on site at all times too, right? So our facilities at WIN, we take a particular pride in them being really beautiful, well-maintained, well-landscaped buildings that are typically in these purpose-built situations as well, a really welcome addition to the neighborhood. I just want to pause briefly. Diana Santos, who is our Vice President of Transitional Housing, who runs all of our programming at WIN, is also with us. So I'll just throw to Diana to see if there's any specifics of program that I should add in, and then I'll just have one more note before we close.
Hi everyone, my name is Diana Santos, as Megan said, and I'm the Vice President of Transitional, which means that I oversee all of our family shelters and our one single adult shelter portfolio. Like she said, basically what we do is we welcome our families and we work with them, assess them to see what obstacles they're facing, where we can meet them. And we do an interdisciplinary team where we meet with them in all capacities to see how we can best stabilize the families and then reintroduce them back into the community. We also work with the community in making sure that we try and hire people from the community, but that our people are also working in the community to assist with other projects going on. Like she said, we have childcare, where we have recreation. We have social workers that work not only with our children, but also work with our schools from the neighborhood. And our objective is just to stabilize our families, make sure that they are in a safe environment and that they continue to go back into the community to the best of their ability and with everything that they need to never come back to shelter. And so in a nutshell, kind of that's what we do as support.
And just my last note on employment to. We recently opened a building in Coney Island, and through working with the local member there and the Workforce One centers, we were really proud to have 34% of our staff are from that area who are now working in the building. So that's something that, you know, both from a construction standpoint and just from an operational standpoint, WIN really tries hard to make sure that it's, you know, when we do come to a neighborhood, it's an opportunity for everyone. So I'll leave it there. I don't know if Administrator Carter, if you had anything else you wanted to add, or if we should open up.
Yeah, a couple of things that I just wanted to add is when we talked about when I talked about the turn the tide plan, what I didn't add earlier is that there are two things. We want to make sure that families in Brooklyn remain in Brooklyn, and so we want to make sure we have enough capacity so families can remain close to their borough of choice and continue with their pediatrician and their school if they need to, and if they go to church and grandparents and whatnot. It's a part of why we want to do that. And the second thing is that part of what we also want to do is that keep, you know, the length of stay as short as possible, right? So when the families come to us or individuals come to us, that they're not lingering, right? So it's really helping to stabilize as quickly as we can housing specialists, all the other social supports, so that they can exit to permanency. So that's part of the work that we also do. And the third thing I didn't say is how do families how will they come to this site particularly? So we have one intake, families with intake sites in the Bronx, which I actually used to run. So families enter at that point, and there's an assessment that's done in that building there. And we will assess if, you know, where they come to us, what borough of origin, and will be placed if they're from that borough or from that neighborhood. Not everybody will be from the neighborhood, but from the borough. And in families with children, there's an eligibility process that happened, which is typically a 10-day process to see if there any other options. With the pandemic, primarily, what we've been doing is as families come in, we have really not been doing any, you know, discharges from shelter. Families make their own decisions to leave, but we've had families just stay continuously and move to permanency rather than, you know, what we had been doing pre-pandemic. We have families in our system now who we would ask, you know, when we do open, if they want to be transferred because they're from the neighborhood or they're from Brooklyn. What we find typically is because families are maybe settled in another area, they may not want to transfer and just want to move towards permanency. And we let that continue to be. We don't disrupt families because Megan talked about families having the right to self-determination. We don't force families to do that. And so, you know, we will, I think, during this time until we get to open, I think build a relationship and really be able to share information back and forth as we get towards shelter opening. Okay, I think that is where I'm going to stop and then take questions as they come in.
Okay, does Doreen want to add anything, or are we okay with all the presenters?
Sure. I would just add that typically for the Families with Children system, our families, if families are already in shelter, they obviously have a choice as a result of the McKinney-Vento Act to have their children remain in the schools that the children were enrolled in prior to coming into shelter. Most tend to do that. Obviously children who are already going to the schools in this community may be part of the families that would be placed in this shelter when the shelter opens, and we provide the opportunity for families to be transferred to this shelter if they're already from the community but were placed elsewhere because we didn't have a shelter in this community. But for the most part, families keep their children enrolled in the schools that they were in prior to coming into shelter. And I just thought that was an important point that the community might want to know about.
Absolutely. We do have some more questions about the education, but let's get first to Assemblymember Abadi, who has a few words to say, and then we'll go to those questions.
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, I can see it.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And first, I have some questions, but I really want to listen. But the most important thing I want to ask from the administrator, Ms. Carter, if we can get a briefing in my office, to my staff over here, because we're 2 blocks away from the proposed shelter, and people are constantly asking questions, and we don't have the answers yet. So if we could have someone that'll make it much easier for us to answer those questions. Like tonight, I found out something. Everyone was saying it's women and children. Now I understand there'll be some men in the shelter. So things like that, if I have an opportunity to talk Win, I think, is a very important part. If they can send someone to come down and talk to us, will be very important. And that's basically it. The one other thing I was going to say to the administrator, when you talk about the shelter, talk about DHS, don't use the word administration in this neighborhood. It doesn't go too well. And I know the mayor very well. But just say it's a project that Win is going to be doing in the neighborhood. I think that goes a long way. Okay?
So, I got it.
So
Thank you, sir.
If we can schedule a meeting in the office next week or the week after, so to answer some questions like how many stories the building's going to be, if there are any other sites looked at, so I can answer some of the questions to the constituents who come into this office every day. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. 2 points. Yuri is here with us, and she is in RIG, so she will be able to arrange that for us to come to do that briefing. And so I hear your point about the administration's noted. I got that, but I do want to stress it's families with children, and some families do have men, right? So we want to make sure that we're not breaking families up. So if it's a family that has a man or even a male headed, we don't. This is not women only. So it's Win and all our providers who run families with children.
It's not a problem. It's just that when I'm telling people it's women and children, it's easier for me to just say the truth that it's families.
Yeah, it's families.
It's families. It's more important. But then they say we're lying to them.
Yeah.
So this way.
Yeah. So I'm glad you were here tonight, and we certainly will make arrangements so that you can be briefed in your office. So Yuri, we will take that back and have someone come and do that briefing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Our first question, I'm going to read them exactly the way they're written. That location of 65th Street and 8th Avenue is inside the zone of PS 69 Street, so 3 blocks away. Pre-COVID, that school was overcrowded. What schools are those shelters attending? Or what schools?
Good evening, Jana. Hi,
Yeah.
it's Jane Kapitanakis. When you look at the New York City school website, when you go to find a school and you put in that address, according to the address of 801 65th Street, the school zone is actually PS 170 for elementary school and McKinley for junior high and Fort Hamilton High School. Of course, school zone lines are often redistricted, and that is subject to change, but just so that you are aware. And yes, while all of the schools have been overcrowded historically, I would add that through COVID, many of our schools have had registered loss, and that's something that's being experienced citywide. But we always make room for all of the children who are sent to our care and who will be needing our education.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Was there anything you guys wanted to add, presenters, or I think that was good. Do we have any questions from our board members, actually?
Yeah, I could just add one point to this school's question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is just to say that we also have 2 buildings on 4th Avenue in Park Slope. And there is a school there, PS 124, who had, some funding challenges and capacity challenges. And we've actually kind of set up a task force, so to speak, with ourselves, the local council member's office, which is Brad Lander's office, the school, and some of our colleagues from DSS, right, to kind of push the DOE for additional resources for this school. And we're able to get an additional guidance counselor and a special education teacher just through our collaborative efforts, right? So I have to be fully honest, I don't know all the particulars of the school yet, right? This is we're still learning about the neighborhood. But just to say that we have a strong history of, advocating in a way that, not just for our families, but for the neighborhoods that we come to live in.
That sounds actually great. Our first question we'll take from Jane Marie.
Jane, you're on mute.
Yeah,
I'm just, sorry, getting to that. One of the things that was mentioned is that the length of stay was as short as possible, but can you give us like just like an approximation? Because what we're talking about, putting the children into school, enrolling them into the schools, you know, helping to help the families through the community, is that at approximately like a 6-week stay or a 6-month
No,
stay?
the average length of stay for families with us is 1 year.
with that, Doris, you want to ask your question?
Thank you. I have two questions. One is pretty simple. When did you first start looking at this property and when did you acquire it? Do you own the property?
So no, we do not own the property. The way that, I don't know if DSS wants to speak a little bit to how the process works, but no, when we'll have a contract to operate the property.
So I'll just give you the big picture of the property of our process of how shelters come to us. There is an open-ended RFP that's out there. Developers may have a property, they approach a non-for-profit provider who then submits to us the proposal. Proposals are then rated and assigned. Once that's assigned, the negotiation for rent happens between the landlord and the provider, in this case, WIN. And then there's a contract that happens between us and the provider. So in terms of when this started happening, I don't know the details as to when that happened, but I know that's the process is open-ended RFP.
Well, I think the community would be interested in how long this property has been on your radar. And you don't have to answer that now. You can come back to us with that. And then my second question is, when this site was, the community board became aware of this site, one of the first questions was, this is a very, very dense site. And could it be scaled back? And equally important, there must be indoor and outdoor recreational facilities for children, because they need space, and we will feel more comfortable knowing that there is appropriate recreational space for children.
Yeah, so I can just speak to the rec space in terms of, when we build and design these buildings, there is always like a large community room space that has, I'm just using one of our buildings as an example, that has like a nursery area that has like the soft flooring and bookshelves and all of those areas, right? And then we always do have an outdoor playground facility with the, jungle gyms and all the things. And I've actually started to look at some like outdoor classroom type things as these have become more popular during times of COVID, right? Where there's experiential learning happening in the outside as well.
So I'd be curious to know what percentage, because this is a fairly large, for 121 families is very large. And I think many of the community board members would be more comfortable knowing that there is a sufficient space for children to play and learn.
Noted. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that, when as a provider that is one of the things that I can say that they have provided in terms of all of their buildings, appropriate recreational space, and they do have larger shelters than 121 families that they do manage and operate, and there's adequate space for recreation both inside and outside of their buildings.
Thank you.
Josephine?
Our next question.
Joe, Jana will call on you. She just has a few more and then she'll call on you. Okay, Joe?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I just want to get to Iris. I saw her name raised. Make sure to unmute before you start.
Thank you, Jana. I did want to speak to the size of the facility. So I too am a little concerned about 121 families, but I really don't have a reference point. So what is the average size of of the shelters that Wynn operates? That's a main question. And then also just learning about this with a developer, wondering again, maybe sort of what the lease is or contract for services. Should Wynn leave, then the developer, owner of the building might use that building in other ways. So I think those are the two questions and thoughts I have. Also, I should say, mental health services for families in your other shelters. Do you provide that directly? Do you access services in the community? Thank you.
Diana, do you want to go with that one?
I'll take some of it, and then the one you'll take, okay.
Okay.
So, I'll start from the mental health and go backwards. So as for mental health services, we have partnered up with Thrive, which is the now Mayor's Wife's initiative, and it's social workers that are CCCs, we call them client care coordinators, that work under a licensed clinician that oversees them. And they work in our shelters. They're assigned to each of our families. They do what's called a biopsychosocial and assessment of the family, both with mental health and substance abuse. And they refer out to the community. We like to work with our communal partners in order to provide services and continue provide services while they're there and when they move out. So we take a lot of pride in that. We work with our clients in all aspects of mental health because we understand the trauma of becoming homeless and all of the other obstacles that New York City and everywhere else has to bring. As for our capacity, we have what's called small, medium, and large shelters because our profile is the biggest family provider. So our smallest shelters are 40, 46, 47 families, and our biggest shelter is 215 families. And so 121 families kind of fall in the middle of our shelters. We have 3 other shelters that are similar to size to the 121. So we have small, medium, and what we consider large shelters.
And just for context as well, when we submit, when we're building new buildings, generally speaking, we're looking at like 200 units. That's been the majority of our new construction over the last couple of years. So this is on the smaller side of that spectrum compared to some of our other buildings that we've done recently.
Thank you. Who was it that had a question just a moment ago?
Joe,
Go ahead.
you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, how many stories is this building, and is there parking?
So as far as I know at this point, we haven't reached a design phase, right? This is still very preliminary as in terms of, the process of actually getting to construction. So I can't speak to the number of stories. I can say that what we've typically done is have some degree of parking for any staff members that might be having to come on site, right? So not like a huge parking lot, but we try to make something available so that we're not taking away from what's usually a limited resource within the community for street parking.
And is the size of the units, are there different units for size of families? Some people may have 1 child, some people may have 5. Is it different size of units?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So as Diana mentioned, we do have different facilities that are different sizes, right? And within those sizes, all the units are typically of varying sizes because there is, kind of a suggested square footage per person that we adhere to, just in terms of matching up families with what's available within the DHS portfolio, right? So we tend to, especially in these new constructions, have a varying size of the units so that we can accommodate families of various sizes. And just to share as well that our units tend to look like, kind of like a larger studio apartment, right? So each has an individual kitchen and cooking facility, private bathrooms, right? So that there can be some semblance of sort of family time and togetherness, right? It's not kind of the dormitory style, what you might think of when you think about a homeless shelter.
So could I just jump in?
Nutrition. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I just wanted to jump in about one thing about sizes for families. We have the state regulates in terms of what sizes, how much square feet per person, and so we have to build to specs, right? So even if it's ground up, we have to make sure we're meeting that. If it's just been retrofitted, we have to make sure we meet that. The state does inspect and gives us to clearance before we can open a building as a shelter. They do come and measure every room to make sure we do meet that. If we don't pass those inspections, we cannot get an operating certificate. And right now, it really is, we have to meet those guidelines. And so it's important to know that we're not just going to put people in units they cannot fit into. And the second thing is that the match happens at the DHS level. When the families enter our system, we have a match that happens. So if there's a family that meets a match in that particular size shelter unit that's available, that's how the match happened. The family's not showing up at the door and saying, hey, I need a unit, and then Wynn is putting them in a bed. We are saying, hey, Wynn, I have Jocelyn Carter's family, and she's going to be placed into this particular unit.
Thank you.
Just one more question. Do you provide nutrition for these families, or are they on their own for food?
Diana, do you want to speak a little bit to how we connect both with benefits and our pantry system?
So the minute that our families walk in, they meet with their case manager on the first day. And depending on what time they come in, they're assigned a case manager within 48 hours. And they are provided services through the City of Public Assistance. But we also provide a pantry, full pantry for all of our families starting off that include food, diapers, wipes, milk, and anything else that the families might need, clothing. We work with a huge volunteer service department, and any donation and anything that we need, we pretty much get from there. But all of our buildings have full pantries to start off our families, and they have full benefits as soon as they come into shelter.
And then just part of our, just one more point is part of our service offering too is working with folks on how to budget, right? And how to kind of, utilize the SNAP benefits that you might have, food assistance in the best possible way, right? Where in the neighborhood you might be able to supplement that if there are other food pantries available, right? If there are things that you need. So we make sure that there's, nobody's going to bed hungry, in any of our facilities. And also too, we do work with different groups who come in and do workshops on healthy eating, healthy food, right? Cooking. So there's a life skill component as well that's on offer for folks while they're staying with us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Our next
Thank you very much.
Our next question, Judith.
Hi, good evening. For anyone who is, a lot of the questions while I was waiting my turn, I looked on their website and it does answer a lot of questions that you're asking. In fact, there seems to be your premier site is the Junis Center, which has 213 people and 416 in the community. I wanted to ask how many staff will be needed? This site on 65th Street is scheduled to have, did I hear you say 221 families?
121.
So it is, okay. Sorry, I misunderstood. But how many staff will be needed to staff that facility?
Diana, do you know off the top of your head, like a comparable site number to pull from?
No.
Try to hire from within so that for them to drive cars to work might be less. Is that true?
Yeah. And I would say that like the majority of our staff aren't driving to work, right? Most are taking some kind of public transportation. But I would say, on average, there's usually, I don't want to be quoted on this, right? Because it depends on the design of the building, et cetera, but there would be like, anywhere from 4 to 5 security on site at all times. And then there's a complement of social service staff, right? So to say, if it's 121 families, there would probably be 6 case managers, right? Yeah, okay, 5 and then
6 case managers.
right.
So it'll be 5 to 6 case managers, about 5 social workers, 2 social service supervisors, 1 program director, 1 licensed clinician, 2 to 3 housing coordinators.
At all times, or just are they in rotating like night shift?
Oh, they rotate. It's a rotating schedule. Yeah, it's a rotating schedule. But that's about right staff wise. Shift supervisor, RA, teacher, 2 teachers, assistant teachers, and rec. So that's about, for that size of building, about the staff.
When I looked at the pictures, there was a galley kitchen, so there's an expectation that they'll make maybe breakfast and meals for the children. But will there be any communal meals, or they're responsible for their own meals even after once the pantry is?
Oh, they're responsible for their own, because they're full kitchens. So
it's really
yeah,
it's a tiny scale, but yes, it's they're supposed to be. So when you staff fill their pantry, then after that initial fill, it's up to them to use their food stamp benefits and whatever public assistance or job to fill that pantry up on a recurring basis. There's no food support except for that initial walk-in supply, right?
No,
it's always available if it's needed, right? So like, so it's we're never gonna say, oh, you failed to do your grocery shopping, so the pantry is shut off to you. The pantry is always available for anyone who comes down and is in need assistance of it. We just initially that's the first sort of introduction to it, right? Is that you've just moved in. Here's at least like we'll get you set up for a few days, right? And until you kind of get acclimated. But anytime that anybody comes to us, we more than happy to fulfill any need that's there. I think though, one thing that I'll say is part of the kitchen and the utilization of benefits, right, and going out into the community is that this is a bridge towards permanent independent living, right? So we do want to be embedding a sense of, agency within our families, right? To get into a habit, get into a program of, seeking out what they need in the community, like growing grocery shopping or visiting another food pantry if needed, to make sure that they have what they need going forward. And that when they do move into their own, independent permanent housing, that those practices continue, right? And so there's not, an entrance back into shelter.
121 families. Do you know how many that translates into people?
So,
do you have a head count that you're licensed to be able to allow in the building by licensure requirement?
Average for a family is 1 adult, 3 children.
Okay.
Even less, families coming into shelter now average 1 adult and 1 to 2 children.
1 to 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sure maybe we can get an update on that. When the facility opens, we can get some numbers or details as that comes up. Now, I do want to turn to the, yes.
I don't understand. Is it a raw space that you're building from suit, or is there a building there already that you're going to add on to?
Oh, building.
No, it's a vacant lot right now. It's a former gasoline station. It's at the corner of 8th Avenue and 65th Street.
Okay, got it. Sorry, no more questions.
So with that, I just want to turn to the chat just for a moment. There are a lot of questions again about the education system. I think a great concern is that we already have overcrowdedness. I'm going to read the questions. You did answer some of them, but just so everyone hears. All the school districts are overcrowded. The kids at preliminary school eat lunch at 9:15. If you have 121 units, how many kids are in school age? How can you fit these kids into an existing school capacity? Again, another question. Fort Hamilton, McKinley, and PS 170 are all overcrowded. How do you take care of the overcrowding? Wouldn't it be better to build another junior or high school at this address? And then so let's see these answers and then we'll go on.
So let me just talk about school in general in New York City. Right? So I think there's the McKinley-Vento Act that, even children in shelter need to be in school. And yes, I think there's overcrowding in lots of the school districts. And DOE, Department of Education, do have to provide education for all of our families, all of our children. And so if children are in homeless shelters, they have the right to education. Lots of our families may not transfer their children to these particular schools. So not every child in the shelter will be going to the schools that are in the neighborhood. Some children may not be school aged. We don't know what size, who the families are until closer to the time when we get there. And so it is, at this point, and maybe a family with a school-aged child, a family with newborns, a family with a child who is 10, right? So it really is going to run the gamut. And families have a decision to make. There's a family worker from the DOE that's assigned to each shelter that's in our system, and they help the families either transfer their children or keep them in the school of origin, arrange transportations for them so they can get to and from school so they're not on their own. They're meeting with every family as they come to us at first at our intake center, and then when they get placed at any one of these provider sites. And so families have the decision that they make. We can't say that families who are coming to this site will not go to these schools or not, won't have the right to come to these schools. So I do understand the idea about this is overcrowded and can we not have them come to the school, but
not possible. One of the questions actually that I do find interesting, those families with children that some of them are boys from the ages 13 to 17. A year from living at the shelter, these 17-year-old boys become 18-year-old illegal adults. I guess you can also say girls. Will they continue to live in the same shelter as men or women, move out alone, or does the whole family move out of the shelter at that point? So what happens to those kids?
Yeah, families with children, we don't disrupt families. And I do want to say something about men or, children who are 13 to 17. These are families. These are families. And so if I have a child who is 17, there's no way I'm going to say you have to leave because you're 17 going on 18. There's a connotation there that's not really, I think there's something about that. Families are going to stay together. If there's a parent who is saying, all right, my child is going off to college and my child is doing, something else. But we're not breaking families up because they're 18 years old. These are families. And so families stay together. They have the right to move out as a family. They have a right to stay in the WIN site or any one of our other provider sites as families. They're families. They're families just like your families are families. If your child turns 18, you're not saying you have to go, you're an adult.
Right. And on that note, I see some comments here. I'm trying my best to read all of them. There's like 50 messages I haven't read yet.
Yeah, and Jan, we also have some with hands raised. I know we have. You want
to go to those first?
I see Doris, and I know we have 2 committee members, but we have a lot of people from the public.
Yeah.
So
maybe just one comment on, because it was just said about somebody in the comments said that if there are schools in there are local schools and we're teaching our kids crime. So maybe remembering also that these kids are kids that are coming from families that are coming maybe from trauma and that they are trying their best and they seem to be well equipped, these buildings. With that being said, let's go. Judith, did you still have a question or was your hand just raised from before? Well, I just raised my hand from before. Okay. And now let's go to Doris. Yes.
Okay. DHS has acknowledged that this site was a gas station. If you're planning to put families there, what environmental mitigation is proposed at this site? Normally, we have other sites that were gas stations and facilities for children will not touch them.
So the city will do an environmental assessment study before a site is opened. That will happen. So that is something that will happen. So that hasn't happened yet, but that will happen.
And will the community board be advised of that?
I will have to come back. I don't know what the process is or what happens at that point.
IGA
will come back to you with an answer on that one.
Hello.
Yes.
Wait. Someone. Sorry, we had one more hand raised. Senya, do you have a question?
Yeah, how do you apply? Someone certain application type or where?
Stella, one moment. Just let us get this one question and then we'll come to you.
Okay, yes, hi. Good evening, everyone. I do have a question. I would like to know, will the shelter be taking in families with an addiction? And if so, what is the protocol?
So families who come to us may have challenges. That might be a challenge. When we'll do an assessment, and Megan talked about, Megan and Diana talked about having social workers who are present. There's an assessment that's done for every family that comes in. And then there are connections made to help support the families to get their needs met. So if there's substance use, if there's mental health, whatever those needs are, the connections are made so they can get their support.
Stella, yes, you have the question before we move on to our attendees. No, okay. So I'm gonna go based on who I see first on the attendees list. Let's start with Vincent Liu.
Give me a minute. You said Vincent Liu.
Yeah, he was the first one on my list.
Okay, Mr. Liu, you should be able to speak.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the information. So my name is Vincent and I'm a local resident. I've been in the community for decades. So based on my understanding from this proposal is that this shelter is expecting to accept single male and single female who may or may not have history of mental or violent issue. This is in addition to families. So my concern is before you guys make the decision on building the shelter on this spot, have you ever consulted the population that would be impacted by this proposal? And those population are including schools, parents, local residents, small business, even include elder centers. If you haven't, I suggest you reach out to them. And I believe that their voice need to be respected and they should have a say on the decision process of this proposal. Second, this proposal, it's to build shelter on a location that's in a most dense area, most crowded area of our community. Have you ever studied or have you ever concerned about what would this adverse impact our community, the people surrounding? Third, again, our community is very crowded. We need more of low, like affordable housing than shelter. Before you make that decision, have you considered the need of our community? And even for the homeless people, they need a permanent residence more than shelter. The last one, have you ever considered the location on 2nd Avenue or below? There are lots of space and you can build a lot more, even affordable, even if affordable housing or shelter. This way, it will have you can reduce a negative adverse impact to our community, and at the same time providing more space for people in need. These are the four for my question, and hopefully you can address. Thank you.
Vincent, there's a lot there. I'm going to start with the beginning. This is not a shelter for single men. This is a shelter for families with children. So this is, we have a system for single men that's completely different from this particular shelter. These are families with children. It's run by a different deputy commissioner. And so families will be coming to us to our intake center and will be placed here. I started the conversation, they were talking about every community taking its fair share, talking about, yes, there's a need for supportive and affordable housing. I absolutely agree with that. But I talked about homelessness is an emergency. I talk about we have a need for that. Families are evicted. Families have other challenges. Families come to us primarily because of eviction. We have driven it down, but we do need to have beds for families when they need it. It's an emergency. When families come to us, providers will be working with them to move them to permanency, addressing their challenges. Providers, developers have buildings, they bring them to providers. Providers submit an RFP, we rate that provider. So if a developer on 2nd Avenue brought us a building and it's feasible, brought a building to DHSR to provide and it's feasible and it's rated and approved, that can happen. If there's a space on 2nd Avenue that you know of, tell us about it. Send it to our IGA. So it's not precluded from us looking at that. So developer, if there's a building or there's a space, provider can certainly say, hey, I have space here, right? We are not the ones that are out looking. The commissioner has sent a letter every single year since I've been in the seat, almost 5 years, that says, hey, we need shelters. If you know of one, if you know of a place, let us know. Okay? We are absolutely open to hearing and seeing and looking and making decisions around, is it feasible? Does it meet our needs? If it's ground up construction, that's great. Is it an area that can support a shelter? That's great. If it's not, then no. But if there's an area someplace else, let us know.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Kenny Guan.
Okay, Kenny?
Hi everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Kenny is a member of our neighboring board as well, Community Board 7.
Hi, how are you guys? Okay, my question is really a couple of questions. Number one, for 121 families homeless shelter, the location is on 65th Street A Avenue, because PS 69 and PS 310. It's right on the block. I mean, it's 2 blocks away. I don't know the city state law with 200 feet and it's allowing to do homeless shelter. But that's my first questions. And my other question is in this is community. I live in the community for 32 years, and this is a logo, small business in my part, and it's the low income families in the neighborhood, and this is a lack of resource to support this homeless shelter project. But we do need affordable housing. We have a lot of property official, you name it, everybody for the mayor to the council. We keep talking years and years. We talking about affordable housing, but this is not really happening in the city. We really need more affordable housing for our community, not the shelter. And number 3 is transportation. I mean, we only have entry like on A Avenue, and this is not a major transportations for those city needed for homeless shelters. And hospitals are maybe 3 or 4 miles away for this shelter. So I mean, this is not very strong locations for this shelter project. I'm not against this shelter things, but the location is not fitting for this project. But affordable housing, it does. Yes, this is my my suggestion. So if you can answer my questions, but yeah, we do looking for some signs. If we have some signs, locations, yeah, we like to provide and we can share the information. But this location is not really helpful for this project. And the kids, the PS 69 and the PS 310, it's right over there. I don't know how all those parents feel because homeless shelter, a lot of people, families, I know that, but we don't know, and you guys may not know some of the self-defender or they have criminal records, a lot of issues. But or maybe you build a factory for them to get a jobs for them and then help them to pay tax, all those things. I mean, this is not a permanent resident for them. I mean, though this is like a turning point, but this is important too. But the location is not support for them. So this is my point.
Thanks, Kenny. I hear your point. I'll start with the first one. There's no law that says a shelter can't be close to a school. And so that's the first point that you made. I do agree that there's a need for housing. What I talked about, emergency need for shelter. And so that's what the need is. Transportation, hospital. I mean, 121 families. Families have a right to travel by the N train and to go to hospitals. And if there's a need for somebody to get sick or to travel, we can't say 121 families cannot be there because they're going to use the N train. That to me is something that we can't address. My dog is about to start barking. Hold on. Sorry.
Okay, while you take care of that, I'm going to ask one question from the chat that maybe our other presenters can answer, and then we'll go back to that answer. How can we apply for this shelter? I am sure that local people will like the shelter. I am sure local people don't have luxuries such as independent unit of bathroom or kitchens.
Sorry, I'm back.
Okay, we'll save it.
Sorry, I don't, anyway. So back to the point I was making about public use of transportation and hospitals. I don't want to touch on something. 121 families does not mean that crime is going to increase in anybody's neighborhood. I think there's a perception that families or individuals or people experiencing that homeless is a crime. It's an experience. It's a point in time. It doesn't mean that they are criminals, right? And I think we have to change that mentality. It is, I came to this country when I was 12 years old. When I came to this country, my mother was a home health aide. She didn't make any money. We lived 4 daughters, single mom who left an abusive dad, and lived with her sister and another sister. We were this much away from being homeless. We were not criminals. And if my aunts were not there, we would be in the homeless system.
I didn't say
I am not a criminal. Hold on, Kenny. Kenny, let me finish, please. So crime doesn't increase because a family is in shelter, right? I think we have to change that perception. I don't think that 121 families who live 2 blocks away from schools are increasing crime, or if they get in an N train, that's the problem, right? I think we have to change that perception, okay? I think that we have to be open. Any one of us are standing in a supermarket, you could be next to a family who's homeless. Any one of us who is in a bank, you could be next to a family who is homeless. Any one of us who is in a hospital, we could be next to a family who is homeless. It is an experience, right? I have been this much to being homeless, and now I run the Department of Homeless Services. It didn't make me a criminal. It didn't make any one of my 4 sisters a criminal. It didn't make my mother less than because she couldn't support her family. She was not educated, right? These are families who want the best for their children, just like you and me. I want the best for my son, right? And because I want the best for my son, I struggled. I got my education. My mom, who works as a home health aide, said, go get your education. My aunt said, I want to support you guys, right? So don't think the families who are going to be at 65th Street are criminals because they're in shelter. Something happened with those families, and I run a system that provides emergency need because they need it, right? And all of us who are here, WIN and other providers, and I hope all of you are welcome into families because they're an emergency. We're not saying to you that, I'm dumping families. I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying to you that we're going to support these families who may have some challenges. I'm saying to you that WIN is going to provide support. I'm saying to you that families are families.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go back to the question that what I was reading, and then I'll go to Dean. How can we apply for this shelter? I am sure that local people will like the shelter. I am sure local people don't have luxuries such as independent unit of bathroom or kitchens. So, all right, maybe you guys can email us resources. So if somebody wants to apply or anything like that.
So families with children shelter there's an eligibility process. Our intake center is at 151 Street in the Bronx. When you come to a shelter intake, you will be asked lots of invasive questions. We do an investigation. There's a 2-year housing history. So families who come to us go through a thorough check, right? If they have no place else to go, they're found eligible, right? Our first look at families, our first option is, do you have someplace else to go? It's not automatic. Single adults, it's automatic because I have to provide a bed if you're single, no eligibility. Families with children and adult families, I do a check. Sending fraud investigators out into the neighborhood. We're doing background checks using our systems to say, where did you live before? So those families who are with us, they have no place else to go. We have done a 2-year housing history. We have called a person they lived in and said, hey, Ms. Carter says that she can't come back. Somebody's knocking at the door saying, you sure she can't come back here? Can I come in and see?
Our next question, Dean.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I just want to make a couple of points. Change is difficult. We know that. And I'm going to make reference to when we have a school opening. There's a lot of concern about what about parking? What about traffic? So many concerns. We've opened up, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 schools over the past few years. Every school has opened beautifully. The concerns that were there did not materialize. Everything went beautifully. And I have a feeling by the people that are representing Win here, we are all going to be very happy with this facility, because what does a family want? The same thing any other family wants: safety, good education, health care. So for those of us who are concerned, I think when this shelter opens, we're all going to be pleasantly surprised that we are helping families to get back into the community. Thank you.
Dean, I appreciate that. And I know my colleagues at WIN certainly appreciate that. We have seen that happen. And it is one of the things that's heartwarming for this job, because, when you see people come to us with garbage bags, all they want is some place to sleep for that night, somebody to say, it's okay. And then to help folks really look at what do they need to exit. So WIN, having, that whatever it is that they need and helping to do that, that's what we need to do. So Dean, I do appreciate that.
One of the questions that I see again, this is I think the third time, and then we'll go to another call-in question. Can you explain what you talk about emergency need? Then there's no discharge. It becomes a semi-permanent site for residents.
So what I mean by emergency need is that, if there is an eviction that happens, somebody comes back and they're locked out of an apartment. What I mean by emergency is that there was a domestic violence issue that happened, meaning that, a woman or a man is unsafe in where they were living and they have to flee from where they're living, and we provide a safety net for them. I say all the time that DHS is the safety net of the safety net. When all else fails, that's who's here standing to provide that service. That's what I mean by emergency. When the families come to us, on average, it's 1 year. So it's a transitional time for their lives. Some leave earlier, some leave later. Some leave earlier because they might be working and they're making a living wage to be able to exit. Some leave later because they may need to find a job. They may not have enough skills. They have to do X, Y, and Z to get there, right? So it runs the gamut. But on average, it is 1 year. We have moved 170,000 people out of shelter since 2017, 170,000. So that's no small feat. And even during the pandemic, we continue to exit families and individuals to permanency. Families want permanency.
Thank you.
Jen, I want to be cognizant of time. We have 8 people with their hands raised, and I wanted to recognize Paul Mack. He's the president of the Brooklyn Chinese American Association. Paul?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just want to thank everyone for giving the opportunity for our community to have a better understanding of your project. And I guess I have heard a lot of good things about WIN. So whenever I hear the name, people tell me that as long as that they are in operation, I think we are in good hands. So so I guess we are not questioning the operator. We are not even questioning the needs of the homeless shelter here. But however, I just want to spend a few seconds to talk about the location. I'm not so sure whether you are aware that, as you know, the 8th Avenue is really the Brooklyn Chinatown, really a centralized location for all the Asian communities from different parts of the borough to really come in and shop and do their things. And I'm not even sure if you're aware that a couple things will be taking place on 8th Avenue. The first thing is that there's going to be an archway representing a Chinese culture archway, you know, to be situated on 8th Avenue and 62nd Street. I think that is going to be a landmark for our Brooklyn Chinatown, and that will be the first gateway representing the Chinese culture in the state of New York, the city of New York. Not even Chinatown in Manhattan or Flushing has that. So we have been really working hard and really with great anticipation that the gateway will begin their installation sometime within the next year or so. And also, I'm not so sure if you're aware that DOT currently they have a proposal where they are going to convert 7th and 8th Avenue into a one-way street. So meaning that 6th Avenue and 8th Avenue and 65th Street will be really the gateway, will be the entrance point for anybody coming into the Brooklyn Chinatown. And that is in addition to the archway being located on 8th Avenue and 62nd Street. So basically, I think that is really the face of the Brooklyn Chinatown. So I guess we are a little bit concerned that by having a homeless shelter at the entrance of the Brooklyn Chinatown gateway, whether that would be the best representation of our community. Again, you know, we heard a lot of good things about WIN, and we think definitely there's a great need, an emergency need for a homeless shelter. But we just want to really have the opportunity to really talk to the operator, talk to the DHS to see whether there's any possibility that we might be able to look at the possibility of not having a homeless shelter at the start of our gateway. And again, you know, being in the community for the last 35 years, I think it took us a long time to really build up the Brooklyn Chinatown. And the business community, you know, they have been really suffering because of the pandemic, because of the Asian hate crime. And so we have been really trying to assist them in making sure that they are able to be open and as soon as possible to really get back to their normalcy. But unfortunately, I guess it's not really happening in the Asian community. It's not really happening in everywhere in the Brooklyn community. So again, you know, I just want to have the opportunity to really talk to representatives from the DHS and from the WIN to see what type of flexibility that you might have. Again, you know, just happen to be the location is 2 blocks away from our and you know, it's exactly on the entryway of the Brooklyn Chinatown, as well as 2 blocks away from the only a Chinese archway representing the Chinese culture in the state of New York. So we just hope that we have the opportunity to speak to you. Of course, we fully understand that the location need to be accessible to everybody, convenience to everybody. I think that is one of the goals that you guys are trying to achieved. But however, we really hope that we have the opportunity to see whether there are other options that you guys might look at. So once again, thank you for the opportunity, and hope that we have the opportunity to just speak further on the location as well as the different things. And of course, I think I want to echo a lot of the community member indicating that actually Sunset Park is really a low-income neighborhood, and probably 95% of the population are really living in single occupancy. So, but however, they are trying not to rely too much on the government system. So therefore, I think we need to provide them with some help. So I think some members suggest that maybe affordable housing or things in that nature might be more beneficial to the community. But again, as far as the location, I understand that the homeless shelter is geared to a CB10 location. And of course, we understand the CB10 really cuts off from 8th Avenue, 61st Street. But however, the way our community is really looking at 8th Avenue, actually, it kind of belongs to Sunset Park, the Asian community. So, so while our community may not be utilizing the service, so I'm not so sure if your intention is to really have the shelter to serve the CB10 population. I don't know whether locating it really next to CB7 or exactly within the 8th Avenue, a commercial strip would be something that you might want to consider. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I think one of the things that I would say to you is maybe there's an opportunity for us to learn from each other, the community and Win and us to see how we could work together. Maybe we need some education about your culture. Perhaps the shelter could be part of the thinking around that. The 881 65th Street site, that is what we do have at this point. I talked earlier about if there are other locations you could send to us and we can assess feasibility. So that's where we are at this point. I do think, and you started your question, your concerns about talking about Win, and I think Win is a strong provider. I think maybe there is some opportunity to work together to figure out how we can best work together.
May I have a follow-up question? So is the location confirmed yet, or does the city have the site control of the location?
I think the location at this point is confirmed. We notified you all in 1014, so it is confirmed.
Okay, thank you.
Josephine, is there a specific person that you have ready to be unmuted from the panelists to raise hands?
I'm sorry, Jana, I got phased out a bit there. So who did you call?
Okay, let's do, do you have someone specific you want to unmute? Maybe
No.
Kevin Zhao?
Kevin.
I have on the top of the list. I do ask maybe, as we're drawing to an end, we ask questions that haven't been asked or express concerns that haven't been expressed just because we are hearing similar things, especially in the chat. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I just want to echo the community member have said. I mean, the Sunset Park is basically a lower income community. I have been in the neighborhood since my teenage time, and we know that a lot of families are like squeezed into the small apartment units, and affordable housing is desperately needed. And we have been talking about it for a long time, but we haven't really heard back any of that. So, I mean, to consider the community need, I think we also need affordable housing in this. And it's a possibility that we can, that site is I can say it's for the neighborhood is the best location for affordable housing. Have we ever consider that? And also, I feel like I'm not sure if it's appropriate location, consider that's not only park we have there, and we are building those cultural symbolic over there. So I really think maybe we should reconsider the location or not. Thanks.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up question on what he was saying as well. You guys don't deal with affordable housing, right? I mean, that's something separate. So you guys are just coming in and, you saw this place and a shelter is being built. So the affordable housing concerns would really be for a different sector. Is that correct?
That is quite correct. Yes, Jana. I am the administrator for the Department of Homeless Services. There is a housing track that's run by a different person.
We definitely hear those concerns that are being echoed. Our next person, Anlu Chen, A-N-L, yeah.
And Lou, you should be able to speak now.
You're unmuted if you are speaking. We'll give it once, twice. All right, maybe we can unmute Kenny Guan.
Kenny spoke already?
Kenny spoke. Were there two Kennys? Kin Hung Fung.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you for letting me to express myself. I'm a resident in the area, in the Brooklyn area. And I just want to ask if anyone can answer me why the city, before they choose a spot and not making a clear evaluation on how the project will impact the community. And is the project will really help the community grow or letting the people to get work? And if there is some concern, like other people talking about affordable housing, there's a big question that Sunset Park area need this. And I just wonder why the city did not express this plan and let the local people join into either helping you to find a spot rather than just put into a spot you choose and then make the project. So if the project really can help the community to grow, and please explain how. So the people will definitely will accept it if you can explain how the project will help the community grow. Because the Sunset Park and also District 10 still is a place where people need to work, need to live. And there's a lot of people that need help also. Why can't the city consider about that? People working very hard to build up a community, and the city seems to try to destroy it by putting some project which could have not a good impact into the community. And that's my question.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. I'll start by two things. Our commissioner has sent a letter to every community board that says, bring us buildings. And so there's an opportunity for that to happen throughout. We committed in 2017 to have shelters throughout Brooklyn. We now have notified in every community district. So that did happen and has happened. And so, every community is going to really be, be in the same boat. It's not going to be just in certain areas only. Wynn talked about in the other site that they've opened, that they've hired staff coming from the community. So there is opportunity to have people who come from the community to work for Wynn. So there's that ability to help the community to grow. So that's something that certainly can be worked on. There's enough time for that to happen. And there will be positions available ranging from social services to the operations of the shelter. Shelter is open 24 hours and there's always a need. Diana described what the positions are. You'll have more information on what that is as time gets closer, but when we'll certainly make a concerted effort to hire directly from community. So there's that need to meet that need or attempt to meet that need as much as possible. And so I think that would be really helpful. Again, I know that there's a need for housing and supportive housing and affordable housing, and so I hear that, but I really have to talk about the need for emergency housing at this point.
Thank you. I think, Lou, we heard you for a moment there. Are you still there? Do you want to ask your question? If we hear you again, Josephine, she's unmuted, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
heard
maybe
it before.
I'll ask a question that was in the chat that's being reiterated and was answered, but I think it might help the community feel a little bit more assured that this building is not here to cause harm. It really is to help other families and maybe work with we'll definitely work with the community, but address the needs. How can you ensure that the building of this shelter will not increase crime? What do you ensure? How do you ensure the safety of our community?
I'll start, and then when you guys can add in terms of what you've done in other areas throughout the city where you have your facilities and the programs that you run. All of our shelters that we have and we have opened over time have 24-hour security. We also, what we also have done is to make relationships with local businesses. Providers also give a 24-hour number if there's anything that's happening that's unheard to call the provider. So there's a contact person if you're seeing anything that's happening that might be any person in our facility. And so there's constant contact. There's also security cameras that's around. And so we make every effort to be good neighbors, as well as educating and we're educating the families about how do you be good neighbors, how do you fit into a community. Lots of shelters and community that people don't even know are there. And Wynn certainly, in my community has a shelter that my husband didn't even know was a shelter, right? So there is the fitting in and being in the community and be good neighbors, so they're not disruptive. And so I don't know if Megan or Nina want to add anything onto what I just said.
Sure. I would just add that, as Jocelyn mentioned earlier, we have never seen sort of a large uptick in crime in any of the neighborhoods that we've opened facilities in, right? Like there's never been a direct correlation between incidents of crime and our facilities. But I will add that, as we mentioned, we do have 24-hour security. We always build a close working relationship with the local precincts. The head of our operations team, which manages our security team, is a 26-year veteran of the New York City Police Department. So has a great kind of operational mind towards not just safety and security, but also like a community presence, right? And having that open exchange and dialogue, which we have found to be a really wonderful asset to our organization. Dana, anything else you want to throw in there?
Excuse me, Janet, can I ask one more question? It's Joe.
Yeah, just let Diana add one more thing, and then I will have Jane Marie, and then I'll have you come on.
Thank you.
I guess just in the spirit of community and what we do, before we even come into a building, we get to know the community, we meet the store owners, we meet the people that are providing services, we build relationships with people in the community and try and assist with anything that's going on, since our families are going to be living there, to assist not only our community that's coming in, but the community that's there. As for crime, like Megan said, we've never seen an upscale of crime because we come into the community. We have 24-hour security to make sure that not only our people are served with protection, but also the community is too. And you'll always have contact information for anyone that's in that shelter for 24 hours. And so the communication between us and the community and anything that's going on in the community becomes also part of our fight, right? Because we're there now and that's kind of home to us too. So I know there's been a lot of talk about how this community has evolved or what the future looks like for this community. But just know that if we become part of a community, we also become part of whatever that community needs and wants to evolve in and wants to assist with, because we too are part of that now.
Thank you so much for that. Jane Marie?
Thank you. I Just a few things. Once again, I just want to mention that again, in the community, as has been mentioned before, just as Jocelyn had shared her family story of coming to this country and the sacrifices that they made, I just want to share that our Asian community also has sacrificed greatly, and many of our families do live in what are considered doubled up situations where they are sharing a kitchen, sharing a bathroom. So while this may be a shelter, I think that it's important to also be sensitive to the fact that for some, this may seem like luxury housing, and that we have to really take into consideration how this is impacting our community, who is also very concerned about where do they stand and where is their affordable housing. So I realize that that's not your agency's purview, but that is some of the feedback that you're getting, and that feedback needs to be taken to the agencies that can help this community who are struggling to survive in this country and in this community. Another point is that you mentioned that you have a Park Slope building, and I tried to look up very quickly because it's similar in size. And that building is it appears to have about 10 floors, so about 10 stories. So I think that it would, size has been something that the community has asked about in this evening. And while the exact design hasn't been rendered yet, I think that it would be probably similar in that they could expect that it would be at least 8 stories high because of the amount of families that you wish to house. So if we could have some clarification around that point. And the last thing that I would like to add is that we cannot forget, as Doris brought up earlier in this evening's meeting, we're talking about the site of a former gas station. And that would involve remediating any contaminated land. This gas station has certainly become an eyesore in the community in this boarded up lot, and we certainly wanted to see something coming that would help serve the community and bring life back to that corner of 65th Street. But remediating that contaminated land is a process that may often take years. Prior to becoming a building administrator at PS 69 around the block from this site, I had been an assistant principal at PS 160 over on 52nd Street. And the site of their annex had actually been a former gas station. And it had been an empty, vacant gas station that the community had been trying to get housing built on, and there were many different ideas as to what was going to happen at that site. But it actually, I know that I was an assistant principal there in 2004, and I don't think that annex came to be until I was trying to check back 2012 because of the issues that came up with that. Now, we don't know if that's going to be the case here. But right now, you've given us a very ambitious timeline of looking for a site by the end of 2022. And I just feel that some of these points, particularly the fact that it is a former gas station, really needs to kind of be put into perspective of how this may really impact the ability for anything to be built or to be built quickly at that site. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jane Marie. I hear your points about doubled up families. Thank you for raising that. And I hear your point about environmental issues. I talked about EAS, and I talked about the state with the regulatory, but we also, multiple city agencies have to come and inspect. So it might take much longer than we think it's going to take. So, we are absolutely ambitious. Wynn is ambitious developer, but I mean, there may be other issues that will arise, that may arise that we don't know. We're not builders. I don't know anything about building at all. So that might be the case. this city is not going to allow us to move forward if, right, all these things. So we have every city regulatory agency does have to say it's okay to move forward. Every city agency needs to come in and inspect and say, this is done correctly, right? Or it's not, and you have to fix this before you can. So 8 years for one thing, it might take us much longer than 2022. And that is reality. None of us know what's going to happen. An EAS, environmental assessment study, has to happen. If it rises all these things, form a gas station, it might. So there is, right? So there is we're going to move ahead, but there are things that might come up that may not make it move ahead in the rate that we wanted to move ahead. And that's real. And so this is, right? So there is, we as non-builders, as non-environmental people, as inspectors, we don't know what that might look like. And so that is true. So we could be ambitious and it may not be next year, right? But we thought it was important enough to let you know that this is what the plan is, rather than doing all the EASs and doing all the remediation and doing all these things and build it and then tell you, right? That would not be correct. So this is, saying October 14th, hello, this is what we plan to do. And then, right, all these things might happen and the plan may not be feasible because it's stopped because of environmental issues or other issues. But we think it's important enough. We said 30 days, so we could have not tell you till next year, but that's not what we want to do. We want to put it out. We want you to know this. We want to work through kind of what we need to work through. We want to build relationships. Like Wynn said, this is what they have done in the past. Wynn is a provider that is reputable. They have the ability to talk with providers, to talk with those who live in the neighborhood, to build relationships. That's what we do. And so we wanted to be able to do that. So I take your point very seriously. I understand that. And so we're not saying that we're going to build anything if we cannot, if it's environmentally, not okay for us to do that.
Thank you for that. I'm just wondering, I think we're going to take one more question from Joe. And then while that's happening, if anyone that has their hand raised would like to ask a question in the chat, we'll take those last questions just because, our goal is before 9 o'clock, but of course we want to hear everyone. So please put your question in the chat while he's speaking, and then we'll get to it after. But Joe?
Yes, one more question. I had asked originally about the height of the building, because I am familiar with at least one of them down in the South Slope. That's the 10-story one. How have now, down there where they've been located, that area has built up. There's a number of expensive residential buildings being built along the corridor there and on the side streets. How has these two shelters fit in there? Has there been a lot of, I haven't heard anything, but there's been a lot of resistance to them after their openings?
So, I will say that when we first spoke with the community, there was a lot of questions, right, and some concerns, but which we had regular communication, and I think we've worked through. And since the buildings have opened, it's been very successful. We haven't had issues. I think the community has been really terrific and welcoming us in. And we have a partnership with a parent group there who has been working with some of the families in our building. So I don't know, Diana, if you want to speak more to that, but just broadly speaking, it's gone very well.
The community, when we first met with them, they had very similar questions. It was a very similar meeting. We continue to have meetings. We continue to come see a lot of the people that lived around there. As Megan said, we met with the parent-teacher coordinators, we met with the school, we met with the principal. And by the time we were ready to open, the community had done a welcoming book for all of our clients, one for the parents and one for the children, illustrated for the children so that they can be welcomed properly and tell them about the community, what fun stuff, free stuff there was to do in the community. And they were so well embraced. As for now, so far, it's been pretty peaceful. It's been pretty good. And we work well with the school and with the community. And so far, so good. But this is usually how we go about it, right? A lot of people have questions. It's something new to the neighborhood. And we get to, learn from the neighborhood, but also educate the neighborhood about some of the work that we do.
No, thank you. I'm sure you'll do the same with this location.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to do almost like a rapid fire to get these last minute questions in. One of the questions I believe was answered. I'm going to say that this shelter will be being built in this location from what I understand. So there's no possible way to stop this shelter from moving ahead, correct?
At this time, no. But to Jane Marie's point,
right.
There may be issues that may arise, right?
The other question, just expressing again, when these homeless people come to our community, they will have better living conditions than us. Is it fair to us? We just need the better purpose for this location. Again, with that, the answer was just that you guys deal with homeless shelters. So this was your jurisdiction. You got this location and that's what was being built. You guys in no way can build an affordable housing unit, correct?
No.
Okay, we will bring that back to the folks that manages housing.
Thank you. And then our community has a lot of concern. We are looking forward to direct conversation with Wynn, then to help to ease our community's worries. So I would say, hopefully Wynn can, and you guys express that you'll be contacting the community really closely, talking to assembly member body to give them more resources so that this shift can be very peaceful. I see some nods. Yes, Diana. Next question. Let's see, 121 units are too much. All of a sudden there's going to be density is a big issue. What I'm seeing is that, if there wasn't a location that could, hold these people, then it wouldn't be there. Then there are questions about, so we can't pick another site unless this site, there's something wrong with it. How many families from Sunset Park? These families are from everywhere, correct? And if they're from local areas, then they're being put into the shelter.
So the first thing we will do once the shelter does open is that we will canvass the families that are in our system already from the neighborhood. We'll give them the opportunity to be transferred to Sunset Park to the building. If they decide to move, we will move. Sometimes families say they don't want to move. Families who come to us from the neighborhood will get first choice if they want to be placed there. Families who've come, second will be families from Brooklyn will be placed there. Families, though, sometimes cannot be placed in Brooklyn because of preclusions, meaning that they have a domestic violence situation that they cannot live in Brooklyn, or families sometimes cannot, even though they're from Brooklyn, may need to be placed in a different borough because of a medical or other situations where they need to be closer to, we do allow that to happen if they let us know. So primarily from neighborhood first and Brooklyn second.
Thank you so much. With that being said, I think we're coming to the end of our meeting. Josephine, do you want to add anything last minute before I close up?
No, I think everything was covered. And I know that this is going to be the first of several conversations that we have. And thank you, Jana, for doing a great job tonight chairing this meeting.
Yes, I also want to thank our wonderful translators, our presenters, our board members, and the public for coming in. It is important to have these conversations. That's why we're here. That's why I tried my best to get everyone. I know we didn't get everyone, but hopefully you guys commented in the chat, and we look forward to more discussions, more material, and kind of easing the worry of this new infrastructure and new families coming in. But hopefully we can welcome them at the end of the day. And I hope to see everyone at the end of the month for CB10 meeting. And I hope you guys have a wonderful and blessed weekend.
And one more thing is everyone who signed up, I do have everyone's email, contact information. So any updates or questions can also be emailed, and we will share information as well.
Perfect.
So I do want to say thank you, Jana and Josephine, for having us. We have been to multiple community board meetings, and I thank you for just the way that you managed this meeting and for the dialogue and the way that you really did a superb job. I do want to publicly thank you for doing that. Thank you, Josephine. I know there are lots of other questions that might come up. Yuri's on the chat here. Wynn is available. Again, thank you all, and have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Good night,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Great meeting.
Good night,
Thank
Jana.
you.
Good night, Joe.